I'm at my machine today and I'm going to be sharing a really simple technique that I use to get perfectly beautiful gathers. So you can use this technique anywhere you have gathers. So your puffed sleeves, anytime you're gathering a skirt onto a bodice. In this case, we're going to be using the Sullivan pattern that has the ruffles all the way down the front and back. So really anywhere that you want to have really lovely gathers that aren't, like the pleats kind of fold over or they're just a little bit messy. You can also use this if you're doing a set-in sleeve that needs to be eased a bit on the sleeve cap. This technique also works really well for that. So if we haven't met yet, I'm Christine, founder of Sewing in the City. Thanks so much for joining me here today. So we're gonna dive right into this little trick. So basically what we're gonna do is run 2 lines of gathering. So oftentimes instructions may say just run a line of gathering at 5/8 of an inch, which is your seam allowance. Which is fine, but sometimes you will get kind of those messy gathers. So this technique, we're gonna sew 2 lines of gathering and we're gonna create a little bit of a tunnel that is going to be where we're going to sew. So the idea is the first thing you wanna do, make sure you have a full bobbin when you start your gathers. You don't wanna run out of bobbin thread or top thread. Then I always set my machine on a 4.0. So normally I sew at a 2.5. So I just raise my stitch length up to 4.0 for a really long stitch length to allow me to pull up those gathers. Now, if your pattern calls for a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, what we're going to do is sew 1 line of gathering at 6/8 of an inch and another line of gathering at 4/8 of an inch. And that is going to give us that little tunnel of really nice, neat gathers that then we can sew our 5/8 of an inch seam. So if your seam allowance is, let's say, a 1/2 of an inch, you'll want to sew 1 line of stitching at 5/8 of an inch and 1 line of stitching at 3/8 of an inch. So you always just, basically we're going to be sewing 1/8 of an inch to either side of our seam allowance, and that way we're creating that little tunnel. So I'll show you kind of how these gathers pull up. So I'm gonna sew my 2 lines of gathering now, and then I'll meet you back when we pull up these gathers. I'll show you how cool this is. So here you can see my 2 rows of gathering, 4/8 of an inch and 6/8 of an inch. And now what I'm going to do is just pull up my, let's see, this was my bobbin thread. So then I'm just going to pull up I'm holding both of my bobbin threads at once and pulling them up. And what you can see is now we have a little channel there right at 5/8 of an inch, and we can sew over our gathers really easily. It holds them kind of a parallel. So see, if we were to sew our gathers along the 6/8, let's say we just did 1 line of gathering, the gathers tend to do kind of this, and they can get very messy, especially when you have a lot of gathers. But you can see right here in our little tunnel, the gathers are nice and straight and neat. So it's much easier when we go to sew these to get a nice even finish. And I find with the Sullivan sweatshirt, it's especially important because where the ruffle attaches to the garment, it's really a focal point. So we want to have these, as nice as possible. So yeah, that is the trick. I'm going to attach this ruffle now and I'll show you the end result. So as I'm sewing each kind of section, I'm just, just taking my finger and I'm kind of adjusting, making sure that the gathers are running, I guess this would be horizontally to my machine. Just making sure that they're nice and perfect there. So just right down at my 5/8. So at this point, I've sewed my 5/8 of an inch and attached my ruffle. The very last step to finish this off is just taking my seam ripper and just removing this, the line of gathering we sewed at 6/8 of an inch. This removes really, really easily. Okay, it's a few hours later and I finished my top. And I just wanted to show you the beautiful gathers. So you can see they're really, this technique just makes the gathers really fine without a lot of the big, kind of like big pleats. It really makes them nice and uniform because we sew in that channel. I just love the way this makes the gathers. It's such a kind of a minute, very fine point, but it really is worth putting in that extra line of gathering. Little buddy over there. It really is worth that extra line of gathering to get this, just this beautiful effect, especially when your gathers are fairly prominent like they are in this sweatshirt. So I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that you use this technique in your sewing, and yeah, hit the like button on your way out, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.